560 The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Outgoing FBI Director Christopher Wray gave his exit interview to 60 Minutes. Of course he did. At which, among other things, he said this about China.
China's cyber program is by far and away the world's largest, bigger than that of every major nation combined, and has stolen more of Americans' personal and corporate data than that of every nation, big or small, combined. But even beyond the cyber theft, there's another part of the Chinese cyber threat that I think has not gotten the attention publicly that it, I think, desperately deserves, and that is Chinese government's pre-positioning on American civilian critical infrastructure to lie in wait on those networks, to be in a position to wreak havoc and can inflict real-world harm at a time and place of their choosing.
The Chinese have already insinuated malware into critical American infrastructure.
That's correct.
Like what?
Things like water treatment plants. We're talking about transportation systems. We're talking about targeting of our energy sector, the electric grid, natural gas pipelines. And recently, we've seen targeting of our telecommunications system.
Seems like that should be something where there is all hands on deck in the counterintelligence community, as opposed to, say, I don't know, worrying about Catholics who go to a traditional Latin Mass, or a
parents at school board meetings,
or pro-life activists who prays outside an abortion clinic in Philadelphia. But that's me. I mean, I'm not career law enforcement like Christopher Wray, somebody who can't leave the scene soon enough. For more on Mr. Wray's tenure and what comes next for the FBI, or what should at least, Thomas Baker joins us, retired FBI special agent and legal attaché, author of The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. Thomas Baker, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan, it's good to be with you again.
What was your take on Christopher Wray's comments, particularly about this substantial threat that China poses? There has to be some evidence of insinuation of malware and critical infrastructure, and what exactly it is we're doing about it, other than on the way out the door telling 60 Minutes about it.
Well, to give the devil his due, so to speak, on some of these external issues like China and like the border, when he has spoken, he's been on topic, but as you say, internally, the issue is, are the resources being devoted to this problem? But he has spoken out that China is the biggest threat we face. But unfortunately, most of our real threats are external, whether it be China in the espionage area, which I think he's accurate to say is probably the greatest threat to America, all told. But he's also spoken out about the open border, which of course has allowed terrorists to enter. And our terrorism problem is really an external problem. Even the issue in New Orleans, we can't be distracted by the fact that the person there was a U.S. person, because he referred to the external, that is Islamic jihadism. And it was the jihadists who have been responsible for most of the terrorist attacks in America. But too many resources have been misdirected for political reasons against Americans. Whether it's Schumer or whether it's Biden, everybody talking about white supremacy. There's no white supremacists attacking us or threatening us. It's a false flag operation.
Well, right, and in addition to how bogged down we were, we had to get in things like January 6th because of the lack of candor from people like Christopher Wray. I mean, it's very much like we're discussing with the California wildfires. It's opportunity cost that is opportunity costs that are being paid because you say one thing during a congressional hearing, but then when we see what you do, it's something completely different. You say one thing when it comes to fire suppression or preparedness, generally speaking, for wildfire season, and then when we see what you actually do on a daily basis, which is you spend your time playing identity politics, to use the California comparison. Same thing here.
Well, very much the same thing. And you said identity politics. The whole woke thing, the DEI, has been a distraction in the draft, specifically talking about the FBI. I talk about, I did a piece last month in the Spectator. I call it the tragedy of Chris Wray. What happened when Chris Wray was appointed by President Trump in May 2017, he had an opportunity, golden opportunity, to set the Bureau right and set it on course. Chris Wray had the full support of the president who appointed him. There was a lot of external and internal support from the agent community, former agent community. He was in a position of trust. It was an opportunity. But instead, he adopted the posture that there's no problem here, that all the bad apples have been fired, they're all gone. And when people presented issues to him, and I document one specifically in my book, where a former deputy director said to him simply to ask all the people, the dozens and dozens of people who worked closely with McCabe and Strzok and Comey on the framing, and that's what it was, of President Trump and his campaign, did they feel uneasy about the things they had to do with the Pfizer warrant and related matters? And he declined that opportunity. He said, I'm very comfortable with the people I have now. And he refused to look at that underlying cultural problem. And each time a problem came up with Chris Wray, whether it was the Dr. Nassar case or whether it was the Durham report, you mentioned the issue of the proposal by the analyst to investigate Catholics. He always said, well, that's one or two, in effect, he said, that's just one or two rotten apples. And he never would look at the underlying problem. Chris Wray's tenure was a missed opportunity to set the ship straight after the damage that was by Mueller and Comey.
The recommendations you would have for Kash Patel coming in, what is it he should focus upon? What are the roadblocks he's going to run into that he needs to be prepared for?
Well, he's going to run into a lot of roadblocks. He's going to run into a lot of internal resistance. But even if he didn't run into that internal resistance, the FBI has grown into a much larger bureaucracy than it was originally intended to be. Even Chris Wray mentioned in his 60 thing last night, they're now up to 38,000 employees. A mere 10 or 20 years ago, there were under 20,000 people in total. There used to be 10,000 agent complement is about 13,000. They've taken a whole new cadres of people. And they have these freewheeling intelligence analysts and people who think up these wacky ideas, like investigating, but who like to use Latin in their worship. So it's a big job. The bureaucracy's been made bigger. There's extra layers of bureaucracy at the top. Kash Patel, or whoever becomes director, is going to be the single political appointee that the new president has. So that individual is going to need a lot of help. And what I've proposed it online in writing. I've tried to get word to people who are working on the transition. He needs a cadre, an advisory board, and I'm not the only one that believes this, of former agents who know the ins and outs of the Bureau to help guide and protect, preach to the current population the new mantra of the Constitution instead of this mantra that's risen up in the last dozen years of DEI and wokeism. He's going to need a lot of help, and a board of advisors would help him navigate the bureaucracy. I think that's the key thing I'm recommending. The other thing we can talk about, if you like, there's some specific structural things that can be done.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. There was a piece by a retired FBI agent over at realclearpolitics.com within the last couple of weeks where he talked about this organization that's being stood up of former FBI agents that want to see the agency reformed. To me, it sounded like from his piece in the same direction that you're talking about with respect to let's focus on our mission. Let's try to avoid the temptation for mission creep. Let's operate within the bounds of the Constitution. Let's be as transparent as we can be with the American public so we can bring them along, particularly in high-profile cases. Those are sorts of some of the people that Cash needs to find a way to bring into his circle.
Exactly. That's reform the FBI. I'm in touch with that group, too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's several problems underlying the cultural change. One is just the heavy bureaucracy, the centralization in Washington, D.C. They've created whole new levels of management at the top. Some of that could be just simply eliminated. That could be done once you look at the org chart relatively easily and get rid of some of that top heaviness. But the culture, I mean, all the slogans, the mission statement, the core value statement, that all has to be changed. I mean, under Wray went along with the earlier things that were laid by Comey under Obama of making DEI one of the core values of the FBI. And they've created, making it further top heavy, a whole office of diversity and inclusion headed by an assistant director. That all needs to be eliminated. DEI should not be the core value of the FBI. Inclusion should not be the slogan. The slogan, the buzzword I propose is the Constitution. Be guided by the Constitution. Repeat that word time and time again. And that's what the advisory group needs to preach within the Constitution, the Constitution, the Constitution. If they were thinking of that, they never would have proposed investigating Catholics. If they were thinking of that, Wray would have been outspoken in his opposition to the Attorney General's orders to monitor school board meetings, because that's a clear violation, a potential violation of the citizens' right to free speech assembly. So the buzzwords have to change. The culture has to change.
And for that culture to change, how important is it that Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, all of the above, some of the above, in some material way, if not criminally, then professionally, financially, that they be held accountable for what they did? Because it seems to me if those bad actors are not held accountable in some material way, then all of the reforms will just be very much, another memo like Chris Wray came in, I'm going to reform the agency in these 5 ways. And of course, whatever he had planned didn't work out into any particular effect. It seems to me you need some people who legitimately deserve a reckoning to be made an example of to drive the point home.
Yes. And you have to recognize the problem. Former Attorney Bill Barr recognized the problem by the time he left. He recognized the problem coming in, quite frankly. And he proposed, and I have this in my book too, Bill Barr proposed to Wray. Wray was made director about 17 months. I may be a little off on that, maybe 16 months before Bill Barr was made Attorney General. And Bill Barr, who was in contact with a lot of former and current FBI executives, knew the problem that Chris Wray would be having with the culture of the FBI. And he proposed to him, and he even provided names, an advisory group to Wray at that point. And Wray rejected it, pushed back. And that's the word I've been told. He pushed back to the against the Attorney General Barr, and he did not appoint or did not want to hear from the former FBI old school people in his mind. That was a missed opportunity. Changing culture is a very, very difficult thing. And I I've looked at this, and culture has been changed in other organizations, in government and in the private sector. Back when Ford was having a lot of problems in the 60s and 70s, one of the leaders at Ford that said you got to get on a key word, and his key word at that point in Ford Motor Company, was teamwork. And he repeated the word teamwork in every remark he made to the people and in every memo sent down. And I think for the FBI, the word has to be, instead of DEI, instead of inclusion, the word has to be the Constitution, and keep repeating that. And if you have the Constitution in the front of your mind, you're not going to look at the American people as the enemy. You're going to look at the American people as people you have to protect. The enemy is still external. It's the jihadists. It's the Chinese. That's the enemy. And you have to repeat that word, the Constitution, again and again, and make it mantra. And I wish Cash could tell well, but I think that's what has to be done.
Thomas Baker, real quick, retired FBI special agent who we're talking to. President Trump hired Christopher Wray to replace James Comey. Why do you think he turned on him?
Well, that's a bit of a mystery, and that's, as I said in my piece, that's the tragedy of Chris Wray. He had the full support of the president. He could have really reformed and changed the FBI, and he had the support of an awful lot of the employees who were sick and tired of this wokeism, but he didn't do that. And then the Durham report came out almost 2 years ago now, when Chris Wray was there, and laid out in 300 pages all the errors that had been made, and he didn't use it as an action plan. He just said, well, those people aren't with us anymore. He just never saw the problem. I think that's the tragedy of Chris Wray. I think, to put it in very brutal words, I think Mueller and Comey were the bad guys who got the FBI off track. Chris Wray could have corrected it, but he just didn't have the heart for it.
Yeah, he's an institutional man. Institutional man, corporate lawyer, institutional man. That's the whole thing. Protect the agency over, to your point, the Constitution or the spirit of the agency as it was, from its founding. But that's what we see over and over again. What people say is the swamp. What they're really saying is these institutional people that will protect the institution over doing what is correct.
You got that right, Dan. And we saw it last night on television. He took any criticism of the FBI as an attack on the good, as he put it, the good working people. No, we're talking about your leadership. We're talking about your unwillingness to change the culture. That's the problem. That's the issue.
Thomas Baker, retired FBI special agent and legal attaché, author of the book, The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. Thomas Baker, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan and Amy. Thank you both for everything you do.
Thank you so much, sir. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
All right, if you're a business owner, listen up.